Welcome to the channel Calm Analysts. Boris Tizengausen is with you. Today is July 26th. Here are the main news stories at this moment. As soon as unknown drones brought a sudden halt to the operation of the Caspian Pipeline Consortium through which oil from Kazakhstan is exported, President Tokayev, during a meeting with Putin, directly informed that old man Kabayev right to his face that it was finally time to end the war. You've taken it too far already. Moreover, he said that freezing the front line is a common practice. That's something Putin absolutely refuses to accept. It was clearly obvious how Putin froze, tightly clutching the chair with his gnarled little fingers, staring at the floor, wrinkling up his Botox-filled face. That is exactly what he looked like. It was unpleasant for him to hear that. Tokayev then, of course, added that Russia is certainly great, but the war needs to be ended. And Tokayev also stated that he doesn't understand the reasons or the nature of this war at all. And the entire world saw it. It's really unpleasant when people from all sides are telling you you're a complete half-wit, you must stop this war or things will get much worse. But Putin couldn't argue back. After all, he had come to Omsk to beg Tokayev for a little bit of fuel. By the way, today there was news that the remaining fuel will, after all, be sent to Russia. Putin has fought himself into this situation. Well, let's take a moment to observe the gloomy henpecked man, and how he squirmed, just like a vampire exposed to the bright sunlight.
Жалко, конечно, молодые люди гибнут. Это генофонд братских народов России и Украины. И все это надо останавливать, поскольку то, что происходит, на мой убежденный взгляд, это на руку и в радость противникам.
And he goes on to say that everyone is tired of this war and it needs to be ended. Old man, you've worn everyone out. Come on, end the war already. Previously, no one had ever said this to Putin so openly, right to his face. Well, predictably, Putin has no intention of agreeing to any kind of freeze. They sent out the mustachioed press secretary Peskov, who stated that, given Kiev's position, a freeze of the Ukrainian conflict as such is impossible, Peskov noted. According to him, Putin personally responded to the proposal from Kassym-Jomart Tokayev and provided him with a detailed account of the so-called special military operation. He gave him a detailed account. Well, that's it. I think you know. Putin was handed some official folder tied with strings. He pulled out some maps that Gerasimov regularly presents to him every day and started to drone on gloomily that our boys keep pounding and pounding, steadily advancing along the entire front, advancing. Remember how he read from the teleprompter in that interview with Zarubin? I think it was exactly the same situation here. Putin was reading out the names of completely unknown settlements, various armies, and specific units. Like, we'll take it now, just a little bit more. So, in general, I think he completely wore Tokayev out. And Peskov added something else. You know what? For us, the main condition is that we must achieve our goals, Peskov emphasized. Which ones exactly? What are the specific goals you are aiming for? You should at least tell your own Russians to fully occupy Donbas. Let's put it in simple terms then. The delusional old man is fully prepared to burn half of Russia for a minuscule, scorched piece of someone else's territory within the Russian Federation. In other words, if you calculate how much he actually spends per day on this war, that scorched territory has already cost its weight in gold. What's more, every day Putin kills hundreds of Russians for that territory. Every day he's completely out of his mind. He can't take Donbas, but he can't retreat without Donbas either. But the Russians decided to make a bold move to capture Donbas. Now I'll tell you what they decided to do. But first, friends, let me remind you not to forget to subscribe to this channel. It's important. You can do it right now without delay. We are fighting against Putin's propaganda, but together it will be much easier for us to do so. So make sure to subscribe. So, what exactly did the Russians decide to do then? Gerasimov probably wanted to curry favor with Putin, to give him a significant present. Things really started heating up for them, and they eventually decided to launch a massive, full-scale mechanized assault on our defensive positions. By the way, it was one of the most massive in recent times. And can you even guess what happened next? But let's go through it in order. Time is running out. Gerasimov officially issues the command. They need tangible results on the ground. They need some significant breakthroughs. And the assault is currently taking place near the village of Shakhove. In other words, they send in quite significant forces. Units from the 8th and 41st Combined Arms Armies, as well as the 90th Tank Division of the Russian Federation, took part in the offensive. For 4 hours, Russian troops tried to break through the Ukrainian defenses, but they failed. The Ukrainian forces not only thwarted the attack, but completely obliterated the advancing units. Aviation destroyed the pontoon crossings, and through the joint actions of Azov, the security service, Air Force unmanned systems, the Border Guard, National Guard, and the armed forces, the offensive was stopped. So according to Azov, in this offensive, the Russian troops lost 7 tanks, 6 armored vehicles, a Grad multiple rocket launcher, a Tornado S, 3 pieces of special equipment, 47 light vehicles, 123 enemy fighters killed, and 29 wounded. The offensive was completely repelled. In other words, the Russians still thought they could break through somewhere with tanks in modern warfare when everything is just covered with drones. Well, in fact, it was drones that took them apart there. By the way, even Russian propagandists are just shocked by this. Let me quote one of them. This is an exact quote. In the 5th year of the special military operation, the brass organized a brilliant tank breakthrough, just like the grandfathers did. It worked for the grandfathers during the Battle of Kursk, so it will work now. What drones? The result was predictable, and that's how it always is with them, complains this Russian war correspondent. Meanwhile, Ukraine is performing an incredible feat. This feat of the Ukrainians will go down in all history textbooks. In every episode, we have an important fundraiser for the defense forces of Ukraine. And today we are continuing to raise funds for mobile command posts for our air defense forces, for those who shoot down Russian Shaheds, shoot down Russian missiles, for several air defense units, and the 152nd Jaeger Brigade. The soldiers have recorded a video message for you. Please take a look.
152-га єгерська бригада та підрозділ перехоплювачів БПЛА Повітряних сил України звертається до канала Бориса Тізенгаузена та його підписників. Ми продовжуємо збір на 2 командних пункти. Залишилось зовсім трошки, і ми з подвійною силою зможемо захищати наше українське небо. Разом тримаємо стрій і захист нашого неба. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Let's help our titans who are holding the sky, and I believe that today we will definitely close this fundraiser. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. There are mono, private, and PayPal options for those who want to help from abroad. And of course, there's a QR code in the corner. It also leads to the fundraiser. This is for those who are watching on other channels. By helping our air defense forces, you are directly saving someone's life. Every downed Shahed, every intercepted missile means lives saved for Ukrainians. Let's help our warriors. And in every episode, I want to personally thank you, as well as on behalf of the dozens of units we've already helped together. Thank you so much. Meanwhile, after yet another disgrace broadcast to the whole world, the underground scumbag hasn't come up with anything new and continues to shell Ukraine. Last night, Kyiv was hit with ballistic missiles, and in broad daylight, Zaporizhzhia was struck with glide bombs. There, a college, residential buildings, and civilian infrastructure were damaged. The attacks on Kharkiv have not stopped. In Kharkiv, a residential building was hit. There are wounded, including children. Odessa is being terrorized non-stop, plain and simple. Kherson, Sumy, Dnipro, Kryvyi Rih, Poltava, and many other Ukrainian cities are under constant shelling and attacks. They are just senselessly terrorizing the civilian population. There is no military objective in these attacks whatsoever. Give me Donbass, or I will keep striking your homes. That's what these attacks sound like. A pure-blooded terrorist bastard, plain and simple. With autumn approaching, when they realize they won't get Donbass either in the fall or in the winter, I think that crazy old man's mind will finally snap. Although, judging by everything, it's already gone. Just today, the Russians burned down another epicenter construction hypermarket. This time, Kryvyi Rih was the target of the attack, so that later no one in Russia asks why construction warehouses will also start burning. I have just been taking a look at the map here. Huge construction warehouses are concentrated specifically in the Moscow region. For example, Limana Pro, the largest player in the construction materials market, they have an exceptionally large warehouse, which is known by the name of Northern Star. It's located in the Moscow region and covers 140,000 square meters. So that later no one asks why the Northern Star suddenly got covered by a star all at once. There's also the company Petrovich with a warehouse in Domodedovo. Yes, there are a huge number of warehouses that are going to burn, just massive warehouses. I see that 500, 600 trucks pass through them every day. That's a serious target. You'll get payback for Epicenter and for ATB and for Nova Poshta, for everything. But today, right after the massive ballistic missile strike on Kiev launched from the Bryansk region, there was another attack. I truly think that the very word Bryansk already provokes a deep sense of hatred. And not just that, Kursk provokes hatred too. So, right to the place from where the attack was launched, many gifts flew in from Ukrainian territory. And it wasn't just drones. Right now, they're counting how many launch platforms were hit. We're waiting for information. Maybe I'll tell you in the next episode, but they struck exactly where the launches came from. And yesterday I came across some discussions about how Putin might actually not fully know what's happening at the front. Remember the interview where they said special news segments were made just for him and that someone is deceiving him? Take Gerasimov, for example, with his maps. And these discussions became very active again after, in Irkutsk. Last year's gasoline prices were displayed at gas stations all along the specific route Putin was traveling, to show Putin like, look out the window, everything is perfectly fine. Although I think it was probably some kind of replicant who went there. Someone wrote like, see, Putin lives in an alternate reality. They show him last year's prices. They report to him about non-existent achievements and so on. But then I have another question. If he lives in an alternate reality, if someone is reporting to him like, we'll take Donbas soon, just a couple more months, it will all be done. A couple of months go by, then another couple of months, then a couple of years. Then it's the 5th year after the full-scale invasion, and Donbas still hasn't been fully captured. But if Putin continues to believe these reports, then he is either an idiot or he himself is part of this system, and he likes being told this kind of nonsense. He himself is playing this game. I think he understands everything perfectly well. And this entire elaborate narrative that someone is intentionally deceiving him, that he's being kept in an alternate reality, they carefully construct it themselves. Suddenly, he might have to testify in The Hague. He'll say, oh God, they told me absolutely no one was actually dying. I was deceived. Here, Gerasimov, it was all him. So I think he understands everything perfectly well. But you'd have to be an idiot if you keep getting the same reports every time and none of it actually happens. For some reason, I have a strong conviction that Putin won't live to see The Hague. His inner circle will get rid of him and cover their tracks. They'll blame absolutely everything on him. It was all him. And today, on one of the popular social media networks, I asked a question, do you have any acquaintances in Russia who at first started spouting nonsense about how they would soon save us, telling us not to resist and so on, but now have suddenly realized the truth of the situation and no longer want to save anyone? And there are a ton of extremely interesting responses. Let me read out the top response. This situation is very telling for the Russian Federation. My aunt was initially quite happy that we were being saved, in quotes, but then she cried because her own son was sent to save us. Then she cried once again because, according to her perspective, the evil Ukrainians had killed her son in the conflict. By the way, she didn't get either a lada or any dumplings because her son ran away from his position, but karma caught up with him anyway. And now she says, why us? Because the gas station where she worked was bombed, she found herself without a job. And unfortunately, there aren't that many other job opportunities available for them. Well, this is a textbook story from the Russian Federation. Living in Russia often feels just like an infinitely long Balabanov film, but not everyone sees it that way, not everyone at all. Thank God no. I have a Russian acquaintance who used to go to protests, ride around in a van, pay fines, and still kept going. Whenever there were far too many arrests occurring, she anxiously wrote, "I am so sorry, but I am really scared." And she sent me a photo showing how many of them were on the square. She left the country because she couldn't live among all that crap. So, well, there really are conscientious people, I know for sure, and they help Ukraine and they help our soldiers. There are such people, but unfortunately, there are far fewer of them than those who will blame everything on Ukraine. They're just some kind of zombies. A lot of answers are, of course, no, there aren't any like that. Those who changed their stance, they will never admit that they supported the fascists, because then they'd have to admit that they themselves are fascists. You know, even if Putin is removed in Russia and he's recognized as a saboteur, a possible scenario, they'll say, we're just little people. If you ask them, how could you support him? Now he's the enemy who killed 1.5 million Russians. Eyes opened, secret files revealed, and it turns out he attacked Ukraine. You didn't know that, did you? So if people are asked like this on the street, do you know what they'll say? We're just little people. We weren't told the whole truth. That's exactly what they'll say. And I'm 100% sure that if Putin were taken out or arrested and then declared an enemy of the people, those who are now shouting Putin is the president of the world would be screaming just as loudly at ultrasonic pitch, Putin is the enemy of the people, just like those garlic and vodka infused protozoa. And it's not like this trick hasn't been pulled before in history. I always use Lavrenti Beria as an example. It's just a classic example. His portraits hung next to Stalin's portraits all over the country. He was the second most powerful man in the country. Enterprises were named after him. Following the death of Joseph Stalin in 1953, several months had passed, and then, on the day of June 26, 1953, Beria was suddenly arrested right in the middle of a high-level meeting of the Presidium of the Central Committee. His former associates, who had literally kissed up to him and called him outstanding, unanimously declared him a traitor, a spy, a terrorist, and an enemy of the people. And then what happened next was something that had happened on more than one occasion in the USSR. In just a matter of days, all of Beria's portraits disappeared, his name vanished from newspapers, and books and photographs were retouched. And people were essentially instructed to behave as if this person had never even existed in the first place. Although Beria can hardly be called a person, according to the official version, he was executed that same year. By the way, you know what else I noticed? I also noticed that in my native Crimea, the occupiers suddenly stopped going on social media and talking about how bravely they endure hardships and adversity. They stopped writing about stones falling from the sky, and they stopped playing that column with Russian songs like Mother Earth when the power goes out. Remember, they used to record videos without electricity but still dance together to the song Mother Earth. Long live Russia! Well, it doesn't seem to be living that well anymore, apparently. Russians have also stopped filming videos about how, despite the fuel crisis, they keep driving and driving to Crimea, to where all of that has disappeared. Or maybe they just don't have electricity or internet to go online and write about how wonderful everything is for them. But thanks to the Crimean partisans, we know that's exactly the case, that the situation in Crimea is getting worse every day, and part of the military and security leadership, like rats, have already scurried away. They've evacuated their families and are already sitting on their suitcases themselves. A couple of mayors appointed by the occupation authorities are already unaccounted for there. They've somehow gone on sick leave somewhere. Meanwhile, Ukrainian and American officials have been discussing a proposal for a ceasefire in the skies as part of this war. Reuters reports that is, according to the agency, the proposal is planned to be presented to the Russian authorities as a joint initiative from Ukraine and the United States. As far as I understand, the day after tomorrow, Volodymyr Zelenskyy will meet with Donald Trump. That's quite a story, but I think right now Putin is just rushing through the corridors of the Kremlin. His three feathers are fluttering wildly in the wind, and he's pacing back and forth and stomping around in his heels. Quick, miss, place an urgent telephone call to the White House. Order it immediately without a moment's delay. He urgently needs to speak with Trump before the critical meeting between Trump and Zelenskyy. He always does that. There really could be a joint proposal from Ukraine and the US, which Putin will, of course, reject, and then that will be yet another piece of evidence for Trump. although I think he understands perfectly well that Putin doesn't want peace at all. Well, because missile and drone strikes, if we are being honest, are the only weapon Putin has left, the only thing he has. By the way, there are also a number of interesting topics for the meeting between Zelenskyy and Trump. For example, consider the recent strike carried out on an Iranian vessel by unknown drones. That vessel was transporting weapons. And secondly, there is verified and confirmed information that Russia is supplying Iran with intelligence for strikes on US targets. So, to use Donald Trump's language, there are trump cards. There are cards in hand. And I think this time the meeting will be much more successful. And it's clear what Trump will say. He recently stated, "I don't believe that Putin is supplying any intelligence to Iran." Well, we'll see. And how could we go without mentioning the Russian Orthodox Church? It's been a while since we've had any news about the Russian Orthodox Church, and yet every day they churn out some new cringe-worthy nonsense, like a conveyor belt of absurdity. The Russian Orthodox Church has called on people not to envy wealthy individuals in power. According to Archpriest Tokayev, large sums of money deprive you of sleep and force you to live for the sake of capital. And power brings no happiness, since those who possess it also don't know what to do. In this archpriest's opinion, the truly free people are those who have neither billions nor responsibility for the fate of the country. Well, they might as well add, no money, no fuel, no food either. Now those are some happy Russians. Just look at what this scumbag is promoting. Seriously, it must be so hard for Putin and Patriarch Kirill with all that cash weighing on their souls. In general, the role of the Russian Orthodox Church in inciting and justifying the war is a whole separate story. Let me remind you, Patriarch Kirill called this war sacred, promised forgiveness of sins to those who go to kill Ukrainians, and urged people to pray for Putin. This is just a very small part of what this FSB branch is currently doing. I believe that this organization will still eventually face punishment for its role in justifying and normalizing the war, at least in civilized countries. And you friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, subscribe to this channel, don't forget. And I ask you very much, let's help our air defense warriors. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. We have just a little bit left to go. I think today we'll finish this fundraiser and the soldiers will thank you immensely. Have a peaceful day, everyone, and glory to Ukraine. And for those who watched until the end, there's a little surprise. The thing is, Siegfried doesn't do this very often. He came over and is sitting on my leg. Usually he just watches from a distance. So this time he came over, and it's been a while since he last did. Well, here he is at last. He wanted to send everyone a very big hello. And please make sure to take good care of yourselves.